Good morning, I'm Mitch Mitchell, Chair of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners. It is now 9:06 a.m. on October 13th, 2023, and I'm going to call to order today's regular meeting of the board. We're meeting in person this morning with commissioners, staff, and members of the public in attendance. We do not have a quorum today, but video of today's meeting is also being streamed live online. The link to watch today's meeting is at www.sdhc.org. Members of the public who wish to provide comments to the board will need to complete a speaker slip here in the boardroom and submit it to our Vice President of Communications, Scott Marshall. To speak in favor of any item on today's agenda, please submit the gold-colored form. To speak in opposition to any agenda item, please submit the pink-colored form. And to those who wish to address the board about a topic that is not on the agenda, please fill out a white speaker request form. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each to provide their comments about agenda items or non-agenda public comments. However, if a large number of people wish to provide non-agenda public comments or speak on a single agenda item, comments will be limited to 1 minute each. Collective testimony by those who support or oppose an item shall be limited to no more than 15 minutes total per side. And when I call your name, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and begin making your comments. Now, it is time for the non-agenda public comments. I have one speaker slip that has been submitted for non-agenda public comments, and that is Joy Senyata. Joy, it's been way too long.
So glad you missed me.
I know, right?
I appreciate that. Joy Senyata, District 3. I want to come right out of the gate by thanking these people. I love the informational report. So let's say thank you to Bridge Shelter, Lisa, Storage Connect Center 2, Lisa, Travel and Training, Zuket, Loan Portfolio, Sujata, and Investment Suket. Thank you. I was bragging about that at City Council the other day, and I think those reports are great, and I hope that more people read them because they're very good. Okay, on to the next one. Thank you, all of you who are on the board, and for your work. You know I appreciate all of you. I do want to give a special thank you to Commissioner Klumpner this morning, because Commissioner, thank you for taking the deep dive into your housing board work. That I'm really impressed by that, and that makes a big difference because that is helping. I want you to know this is the truth now. That is helping me shape how I view our current housing crisis, and it's a big shift for me. So yesterday, I called into the Environmental Committee, and on non-agenda public comment, I was speaking directly to Chair LaCava, and my topic was the environment of the current housing crisis. And I told the chair, LaCava, that I'm talking to you first because he said something really great last week. He said, we've got to do a deep dive. He's a deep dive person too. We've got to do a deep dive into the other part of housing, the private sector, all those builders, all those producers and so forth. We have to find out the whole picture. And I want us to make that happen. So I'm going to be really, really coming after that because I think it's a missing component. It's missing for me, and I really need to see their side. So I wanted to share that with you today because I hope you can come on board for that and make that happen so we can have the whole picture of what's going on. I've been more idealistic, and I think it's time for me to make a shift and get holistic. So I think that's it. Love to all. I'll be speaking later, and I appreciate you so much, and again, love to all.
Thank you, Joy. All right, I don't have any further speaker slips of non-agenda public comments. We will now go to commissioner comments. Are there any? Vice Chair Klumpner.
May I ask Lisa to come up for our monthly update?
Realized I don't know why I was hiding in the back. Sorry, I'm not really here. It took a couple of weeks. I thought I'd just take a little more. Yes, thank you. So we're looking back for the month of September, and our total referrals to shelter were 1,930, so nearly 2,000 referrals in the month of September. Of those referrals, 393 were placed, so we had about a 20% success rate. That's lower than we have seen in previous months, our occupancy is high. So yesterday it was at 97%, but it has been ranging up to 98%, which is essentially full, and particular single adults has been full. We have the majority of only 18 beds that are offline right now, mostly due to some isolation needs and maintenance. And 1,649 were occupied yesterday of the beds that we track. So very full system right now.
Thank you. So to put a finer point on it, about 1 in 5 people who are requesting shelter actually receive shelter. I've had a few people reach out to me and ask what is, I think, a very obvious question to anybody looking at it on the outside, even though we've heard this from different angles in all the reports, but why are those 80% not able, well, why is there 2% on any given day available that is not filled by that 80%?
So there's a lot of reasons. An example is that we probably have, in the month of September, we had a number that were referred that didn't show up. So the referral is made, they've accepted and want to come to shelter, and then they don't show up. And so that bed ends up being empty that night and rolling over.
And I'm guessing we don't have super reliable ways to call them on their cell phone and see where they're at.
That is correct, yeah. So once they don't show up, we've kind of lost that. They might show up again tomorrow, but that means that bed was held and then not used. If someone presents at the shelter itself, after a certain period of time, like in the evening, that shelter wants to take someone in, they can do that. So they have the ability to directly place someone when they present and show up. But there's always sort of a few beds that roll over for a variety of reasons.
So basically the 2% we're looking at is the ones that are in the process of turning over.
Yeah, one way or another.
So just to be really clear about this, for those 80% that were not successfully placed, functionally speaking, there was not a single bed available for those people who...
Functionally speaking. So of the referrals that come through and the ones that don't end up getting shelter, of those 85% are because there was not a bed available to meet their needs.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Vasquez.
Is there any way I can ask Lisa a question?
Well, she was on vacation, but she's back now, so.
How do you do that with a straight face? So just real quick. I was wondering if you noticed an effect from the city's ordinance for people that effect on the amount of beds available or the occupancy after the city's ordinance passed regarding moving people who are in the tent cities into shelters. Have you noticed an increase or any kind of, is there any way to identify which of those people are placed by the new ordinance?
No, there's not a way to identify which are specifically placed other than the beds that are specifically set aside. So there are 50 beds set aside at Father Joe's, which are homeless outreach team beds. There are 50 beds set, and that's at Father Joe's Paul Mirabile Center. There are 50 beds set aside through 16th and Newton Alpha Project, which are called direct placement beds, where SDPD can directly place. Mm-hmm. Those have been the only beds in our system that the commission oversees that were prioritized for PD, so they're only available to PD. Otherwise, any other bed that the commission oversees, PD has had to just compete like everybody else. And the majority of the referrals come through outreach workers rather than PD for those regular beds. The site at 20th and B that the city oversees, the 140 or so tent site, that was being used predominantly, is my understanding, for direct placement in regards to enforcement, and has continued to be full. More recently, about 3 weeks ago, an additional 50 beds were identified out of the 324 at Golden Hall to also be used as direct placement beds. Mm-hmm. They're at about, so Golden Hall is full. So basically what the city has been doing and asked our coordinated intake team to do is over attrition, so as people leave, to make that bed available to PD direct placement up to 50 beds. I think we're at about 25, 26 right now, so we're about halfway there over the past 3 weeks. So that would mean that once those are full, and that allocation exists, basically there'd be 150 beds out of the 1,679 or so that the commission oversees that are solely for direct placement for either PD or the homeless outreach team.
And can I ask a silly question? PD stands for the police department?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry. And it's a little confusing because direct placement stands for DP, so you could date SDPD, DP, never mind. It's just
Acronyms.
So, yes, police department direct placement or homeless outreach team direct placement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one more question for you. Do we have any sense of why why we're down to 20% as compared to the prior month, which I think was closer to 30%? What's changing?
Less beds available.
Less beds.
There's just less beds. We've seen summer's always a little lower occupancy because the weather's nice, people are out. We just tend to see occupancy.
So by less beds available, you mean more people in
There's
in
more
the beds
people in the
and more
beds.
people seeking.
Yeah, there's
beds.
more people in the beds, which means of the people seeking, less people are getting in.
So our total beds has stayed the same or potentially gone up a bit depending on what's happening on other fronts, but we have more people
In them.
and seeking to be placed in them.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will make a few comments. First of all, I want to start with, and Lisa, your statistics are always sobering. I appreciate Vice Chair Klempner's focus every meeting on this because I think it's important to really shape this situation properly. This discussion has been hindered and hurt by rumor and innuendo and not fact. And I think when Vice Chair Klempner asks you these questions, I appreciate the fact that you come in with the numbers. I think the one number that probably everybody that's watching this or that watches this that will stand out is that you mentioned that you had 1,900 referrals and 1,600, a little over 1,600 left without a placement, right? And that is the crisis that we are in, and it's good evidence. I wanted to, as the fall has now arrived, and even though the weather is still decent, it will turn soon enough, and with the expectation that we'll have an El Nino, I think that this situation becomes even more severe as we try and figure out a way to get as many people out of the weather as possible, especially if it is indeed a wet winter. That being said, I'm really happy about the announcement this week on the first two properties for HomeKey. That's I want to take my hat off. Kudos to the entire team that we managed to get the applications in, and to my fellow commissioners, I think I'm really happy that only two entities applied for HomeKey funding in this region for this round: the Housing Commission, the City of San Diego, and the county, and then the City of Chula Vista. And fall and winter will happen in all 18 cities. And so I think that the fact that we are thinking about this ahead of time and trying to figure out what we're going to do, and hopefully this will lead to some constructive conversation with the city about additional beds that can be made available. This is the time to do that. And so, Lisa, I appreciate everything that you and the team are doing. Again, you should all be incredibly proud that the first two properties have been approved, and let's hope that that the remaining application that we've submitted also gets approved. In recent weeks, I've had a number of conversations with my colleagues, and I'm sure Vice Chair Klempner has the same situation. What's striking to me is the number of people who are truly now focused on blame. It's consternation, not being constructive, and to the entire Housing Commission team, just block the noise out, just keep doing what you're doing, as I remind my colleagues, and sometimes it's really uncomfortable because I just think that some people have stopped listening. It's easier to blame. I read an article a few weeks ago, or last week actually, where there's a gentleman who's got a proposal, and it's the mayor's fault that his proposal's not getting legs. It's the most outrageous thing in the world. I've never seen a problem solved by someone just being critical every single day instead of being constructive at one point. And the crisis that we are in is going to require a portfolio of solutions. Joy, I appreciate your conversation with Councilmember LaCava. We're going to have to start building on the coastal zone, and everybody needs to realize that. We're not going to get out of this crisis by just dabbling around the edges and building one or two here, but avoiding the coastal zone. And I think the city council all agrees with this. And so, as we look to the next hopeful good news on Home Key, as we look to the fall, as we look to the winter, let's just keep doing what we're doing. And we have a role to play, and I appreciate the commitment of every member of this board and to every member of the team. So with that, we will move on. Jeff Davis, the floor is yours for the interim president and CEO report.
All right. Good morning, commissioners. I do have a few items for you this morning. First of all, along with Mitch's comment, I want to make clear that we received an announcement from the state this week that they are awarding $20.75 million in Home Key program funds to the Housing Commission for 2 projects. I want to thank Mayor Gloria, City Council, this board for your leadership and support of our successful applications for these funds. I want to make a special thanks to Mitch Mitchell for his truly tireless efforts to secure support letters from numerous important local associations, agencies, and businesses. Keep them coming, Mitch. We will be returning to the board and the Housing Authority to request the approval to accept and expend these funds. The Home Key grants will support the creation of 75 affordable housing units with supportive services for people experiencing homelessness. We want to make clear that the County of San Diego is a vital partner in these efforts, and we want to thank them for all that they have agreed to do. In May, the Board of Supervisors approved funding for these projects and for the supportive services for these projects. One project is the Housing Commission's proposed purchase of the Ramada Inn on Midway Drive in Council District 2. The state has awarded $16.8 million toward the purchase and rehab of this property to create 62 affordable housing properties for those that are experiencing homelessness. In addition, the state awarded $3.9 million toward the Housing Commission's collaboration with Wakeland Housing. And this project will involve the rehabilitation of the apartments on Abbott Street, also in Council District 2, to create 13 affordable rental housing units for people experiencing homelessness. Residents at both properties will receive access to a variety of robust supportive services. And the Housing Commission has committed rental housing vouchers to both properties so that residents have assistance in paying their rent. 2 additional applications that we submitted are still pending decisions from the state for this round of Home Key funds. We've applied for more than $63 million toward the purchase and rehab of 2 extended stay properties to create 266 additional units for people experiencing homelessness. I see my next comment is that we expect to receive threshold review comments soon from the state, but that actually happened last night, as I recall. And Emily and her team are working on responses. So after that threshold review, the state will decide whether or not to award what are unfortunately very limited funds from the state. A new program known as Senior Safe at Home was announced on September 29th. This program will provide a housing lifeline for seniors in San Diego to prevent homelessness and to help them remain in their homes. City Council President Sean Elo Rivera was instrumental in developing this program. He brought the Housing Commission, Serving Seniors, and the Lucky Duck Foundation together to collaborate on this program. Eligible seniors with low income who are experiencing a housing crisis will receive $250, $500, or $750 per month toward their rent. The Housing Commission will receive referrals, determine if seniors are eligible for the program, and process the payment each month to the senior's landlord. And Serving Seniors will provide robust case management and connect seniors to available community resources. I want to thank very much the Lucky Duck Foundation, who has invested $500,000 in philanthropic funds to make this program possible. Many seniors are on fixed or limited incomes that just do not keep pace with the rising cost of living in San Diego, and it puts many of them at risk of homelessness. And the percentage of unhoused San Diegans, as you know, who are seniors already is on the rise. So a little extra help each month goes a very long way towards enabling seniors to remain housed and to be able to live without constant fear. Intakes for the program began last week and will be continuing in the coming weeks. Seniors interested in this program should call the Housing Commission's Housing First San Diego phone at 619-578-7768. The Senior Safe at Home program is an essential effort to prevent homelessness for households. However, for those who are currently unsheltered, outreach programs are an important part of the system to connect them to services that they need and ultimately to shelter and long-term housing. The Housing Commission launched the multidisciplinary outreach program last year with funding that the City Council specifically set aside for that purpose. We also received some funds from the Regional Task Force on Homelessness. My update to you in July included the fact that additional state funding had been allocated to support the multidisciplinary outreach program. And on October 5th, Assemblymember Brian Mainshine, Mayor Todd Gloria, and Council President Sean Elo Rivera formally announced that these state funds are available at a news conference. The multidisciplinary outreach program serves individuals and families who are among the most vulnerable people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in the city. The program focuses on people experiencing unsheltered homelessness who are among the very highest utilizers of criminal justice, emergency services, or homelessness services systems. Many are chronically homeless, living with untreated medical and behavioral health conditions, and have not been stably housed in years, despite attempts by other programs to serve them. Outreach to these individuals require more time and attention than other programs. On average, program staff spend 20 hours per week per engaged individual. Currently, 17 people are enrolled in the outreach program, with another 3 in the process of being enrolled. With these additional state funds, the outreach program will be able to assist another 20 people at a time. The Housing Commission contracts with PATH San Diego to operate the multidisciplinary outreach team, and PATH subcontracts with Father Joe Villages for the healthcare component of the program. Resident-focused activities like bingo, lunch, and a guest musician highlighted a celebration last week of the affordable housing development known as Tizon. This project rehabilitated a former hotel in Rancho Bernardo to create 175 new affordable studio apartments for seniors aged 62 and older with incomes of 40 to 60% of San Diego's area median income. Mayor Gloria and Councilmember Marnie Von Wilpert were among the attendees at the event, which the developer Affirmed Housing organized. The Housing Commission awarded 44 rental housing vouchers to help pay rent for the residents with income up to 40% of the AMI. We also awarded a $4 million loan to support the program, and financing included $24.9 million in tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds that this board and the Housing Authority approved. These units at Tizon will be affordable for another 55 years. And finally, the Housing Commission received 4 awards of merit last week from the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, or NARO. Our bond recycling program, through an innovative partnership with the California Housing Finance Agency, was recognized. Bond recycling allows for the use of bond capacity that is normally lost, and it recycles those bonds into new projects without the use of low-income housing tax credits. Our rehabilitation of Mariners Village apartments was also honored. We used a unique income averaging approach to apply for low-income housing tax credits to complete the first comprehensive rehabilitation of this affordable housing property in 34 years. And the project also extended the affordability for those units. A credit building loan program through our Achievement Academy also earned an award of merit. This program is a collaboration with Local Initiatives Support Corporation, or LISC, and the International Rescue Committee. Through a series of installment loans with no interest charges, this program helps participants to build their credit scores. And our emergency housing voucher program was also honored. We helped eligible families lease rental homes with these vouchers much more quickly than most jurisdictions across the country. Each of the honored programs is also under consideration for NARO Awards of Excellence. Only about 20 programs nationwide each year receive that award. And that concludes my report. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jeff. I think it was an excellent report, a lot of information, and more importantly, a lot of good things happening as this amidst this housing crisis, trying to find more opportunities for people to be sheltered. So, all right, next up on the agenda are the minutes. And Chuck, General Counsel, I assume that because we do not have a quorum, we will have to move this to the next meeting for official approval of the minutes.
We've always taken the position that you could approve minutes with less than a quorum.
Okay.
But you can move it if you'd like. It's up to you.
Well, then we will move forward with approving the minutes. Chuck, if you say we can, that's fine. I just didn't want to assume that we could. So I think then what we'll do is we will look at the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 15th. No speaker slips have been submitted regarding the minutes. So, commissioners, any changes or comments?
So moved.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Klempner.
I'll second it.
A second by Commissioner Vasquez. I was looking to see, those are... All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes of September 15th, 2023, signify by saying aye.
I should abstain because I wasn't there. Is that okay?
Rich?
Chuck?
Yeah, you could certainly.
Okay, so
And if you prefer, we move it to the next meeting.
Motion carries 2-0 with one abstention. Okay, 201. All right, thank you very much. All right, we'll now move to item 100 on the agenda. The next agenda item is on, it was probably one of the most important conversations, and I see Wendy, I have an answer DeWitt smiling. Our Vice President of Preservation, Wendy DeWitt, and Special Programs Manager, Nadir Ho, will present this item. And again, this is on the Deed Restriction Affordable Housing Preservation Ordinance Framework. So, Wendy and Nadir, the floor, the mic are yours. While Wendy's setting up her presentation, I will make this comment. I'm going into it early on that I think we all realize that we have some building to do and some constructing to do in terms of housing. I think this presentation is really important because in order to really address the situation in San Diego, we're going to have to build more, but we're also going to have to continue to preserve the opportunities that we have today that are providing support. So with that, Wendy, I think you're ready.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. This morning, we're presenting to you the framework for a proposed local deed-restricted affordable housing preservation ordinance. This discussion of a proposed ordinance emerged from a study that the Housing Commission published on May 28th of 2020, Preserving Affordable Housing in the City of San Diego. The City Council's Land Use and Housing Committee discussed and provided comments on the study. And then in October of 2020, the City Council approved 7 actions to implement a strategy for affordable housing preservation. Those actions included convening of a preservation collaborative stakeholder group and developing an affordable housing preservation ordinance. The Preservation Collaborative Stakeholder Group meets quarterly. It discusses preservation priorities, funding resources, and a 2-track approach to implementing preservation programs. In March of this year, the Housing Commission presented an informational update on the preservation strategy to the Land Use and Housing Committee. And at that meeting, the committee directed that staff return by the end of the year to present parameters for an affordable housing preservation ordinance that would include a right of first offer and a right of first refusal to be provided to qualified entities, including nonprofit and for-profit organizations, for consideration. The public has made substantial investment in the creation of affordable housing and has made it a priority to protect the affordable housing stock whenever possible, providing affordable housing in perpetuity. A local ordinance would expand opportunities granted under state law to preserve affordable housing and increase housing opportunities for people of very low, and moderate income. This slide shows a brief summary comparison of state law and existing state law and the proposed local ordinance.
State preservation law requires an owner to provide notice to tenants and qualified entities at specific intervals before deed restrictions expire. The first notice to tenants occurs 3 years before the expiration of deed restrictions. Additional notices must be provided to tenants and qualified entities at both 12 months and 6 months prior to the expiration date. These notices are required at times when the property is not necessarily for sale. The proposed local ordinance would require notice at a time when the owner intends to sell. This would provide a better opportunity for preservation of the affordability. The proposed Affordable Housing Preservation Ordinance framework was developed in consultation with the Preservation Collaborative Stakeholder Group. The framework was then presented to multiple stakeholder groups for comment, as shown on this slide. The stakeholders included the affordable housing development community, both for-profit and nonprofit, private rental housing owners, downtown business and housing owners, tenant associations, and the general public. The comments we receive have resulted in additional clarifications, amendments, and exceptions to the proposed framework. So next, I'll turn it over to Nadir, who will go over the framework.
The proposed framework for a local ordinance consists of the following parameters. Properties subject to the ordinance would be deed-restricted affordable properties of 5 units or more. The ordinance would apply when the owner of one of these properties intends to sell or transfer ownership. The proposed ordinance would require owners to first provide a notice of intent to sell. This notice of intent to sell would be provided to affected tenants, local government entities, and qualified entities. The right to make a first offer to purchase and the right of first refusal would only be included in the notice provided to local government entities and qualified entities. The framework for the proposed ordinance adopts the state definition of qualified entities. This includes tenant associations of the development, local nonprofits and public agencies, regional or national nonprofit organizations or public agencies, and profit-motivated housing organizations or individuals committed to maintaining the affordability of the property for very low or moderate income households. The qualified entities are approved by a state self-certification process, and are listed on the qualified entity list on the state preservation website. Upon receipt of a notice of intent to sell, the qualified entity would have 30 days to indicate an interest in submitting an offer to purchase, then 60 days from the letter of interest to make an offer to purchase, which the owner may accept or reject. If an owner does not accept a qualified entity's offer to purchase, the owner could market the property and obtain an offer from a non-qualified entity. If the owner intends to accept that offer, any qualified entity whose offer was rejected would have a right of first refusal. The owner would be required to notify those rejected qualified entities, and they would have 7 days to make a counteroffer. The counteroffer must mirror the terms and conditions of the pending offer to purchase, unless modified by mutual consent. If the owner accepts a qualified entity's offer to purchase, the qualified entity has 30 days to enter into a purchase agreement. Once the purchase agreement is executed, the qualified entity has 120 days to close. The qualified entity that purchases the property would be required to preserve it at current income levels. Tenants could not be involuntarily displaced unless there's a breach in the lease. The framework for the proposed ordinance requires that all notices to tenants must be made by first-class mail or electronically. Public agencies and qualified entities must be notified either by first-class mail or electronically if an email address is provided for that purpose. Specific types of ownership would be exempt from the terms of this ordinance, and these are included in this slide. I'll just give a few moments for people to look at those. Okay. And the proposed ordinance would be enforced through legal action initiated by a qualified entity, public entity, or tenant association adversely affected by an owner's alleged failure to comply with the ordinance. The framework for the proposed ordinance uses the same definition as the state for a qualified entity. The criteria to be considered a qualified entity is shown on this slide and the next. So we'll give people a chance to read through those. Okay, great. And now Wendy will review the comments we received from the stakeholder meetings about the framework.
Thanks, Nadir. A summary of the comments that we've received to date are shown on this slide. The comments generally fall into the following categories. The first, can an owner be exempt from noticing when they are planning to sell to a qualified entity? We've proposed an exception for this in the framework since an owner who's intending to sell to a qualified entity achieves the purpose of the ordinance to provide the opportunity to transfer to an entity that will maintain the affordability. Second, the method of enforcement relies on the injured party to file a lawsuit. And this might not be the most efficient way to enforce. This was included, it's reflected in the state law. It's what we saw when we read similar ordinances. But what we're going to do is if we were to receive direction to draft this in an ordinance, we would present that issue to the city attorney and ask for alternative methods to see what's out there. The balance of the comments deal with the timelines proposed and how long an owner is required to basically hold the property off of the market before they can market it to anyone else. And then they also involve the concern of a qualified entity buyer having sufficient time to obtain financing such as tax credits and tax-exempt bonds. So it's a balance between those two interests. So in response, we've looked at the timeline leading up to a purchase agreement and actually to the owner's receipt of an offer. So which the owner at that point can accept or reject and market the property to others. So under the proposed timeline, once that notice of intent to sell goes out, the owner would have to wait 30 days to see if they get a letter of interest from any of the qualified entities. If they don't, then there are no interested qualified entities and they market their property. If they do get a letter of interest, then they'll have to wait another 60 days for an offer from that qualified entity. If they don't end up submitting an offer, again, the owner could market, or if the owner does receive an offer, they may accept it, which would be great, or they can reject it. They're not required to accept that offer. So they could reject it and then market their property to the world, so to speak. So that means the owner would really be prevented from marketing to the world for 90 days. The timeline to close is typically specified in the purchase agreement, including any other conditions that may be agreed to between a seller and a buyer, maybe earnest money deposits and so forth. So we also received the comment that 120 days, that might not be long enough to get affordable housing financing. So we're proposing that the purchase agreement, the seller and the buyer get to the purchase agreement, they've got a contract now that they've both agreed to, those timelines in that contract should prevail, so that we wouldn't prescribe beyond that point timelines because seller and buyer have agreed to something. So those are changes that we've made to the proposal in response to these comments, but we're still receiving comments. We want to hear from both sides because it is going to be a balance, and we're trying to propose something that's not too onerous on an owner or unrealistic for an affordable or other qualified entity buyer. So that's the balance we're trying to achieve in these timelines. So we continue to receive those comments. So where do we go to from here? We're scheduled to present the framework on the proposed ordinance to Land Use and Housing next month, November 16th. And then based on the direction we receive from the committee, if it's to move forward, we would work with the city attorney's office on drafting actual ordinance language. And of course, the timing of that depends on the availability of the city attorney, how busy they are. So we're estimating a 6-month drafting period there. And then it would be followed by another 6 months of additional stakeholder meetings because now the language is down on paper. So we anticipate additional comments. And so we're setting aside another 6 months to go through that process again with actual language before we would have something to take back potentially the first quarter of 2025 back to Land Use and Housing and City Council for consideration. So that concludes our presentation today, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Wendy and Nadir. We do have a couple of speaker slips that have been submitted by Scott Marshall, and we will start with Joyce Nyada on item 100, and then followed by Stephen Russell.
That's Scott. Joyce Nyada, District 3. I'm so excited to have Mr. Russell present, and I'm so looking forward to what he has to say. Joyce Nyada, District 3. Wow. This is one of my babies. I love this preservation. And Wendy, I'm so proud of you and the Housing Commission that you came out way back when and brought forward the plan. That was a terrific milestone, and it's been bumpy, hasn't it? But it does seem like the momentum is back, and we're really moving forward. It still seems like a long, long time till it really comes to fruition, but I invite all of you to please, please stay with this, spread it out, talk about it, because we have to keep preservation going, and we have to prevent this the homeless issue, all of these issues from happening. And I just, my 3 Ps, I kept putting them out there. I put them out there years ago. They're preservation, prevention, and powering, to power the people. So I just love this. As the two of you were speaking, I can't remember who said it, but 2 of the things, this won't be said just perfectly, but what a vulnerable period before it goes out to the world. I mean, isn't that something, before it goes out to the world? Yet we're all the world, in one togetherness. So isn't it interesting that we go out to the world? So, and also, the language is down on paper. Thank you. I don't know who said that, but it feels good that it's down on paper. I think that makes a difference. So it's coming before Land Use and Housing on November 16th. Please, everybody, show up or send your comments in, or, be our cheerleader for this. Thank you, Wendy, and your team. And I'm just so excited, and I love you so much for keeping this going.
Thank you, Joy. Next up, Stephen Russell.
Good morning, Honorable Commissioners. My name is Stephen Russell. I'm the President and CEO of the San Diego Housing Federation. We're very pleased to be part of this Preservation Task Force, and I think we want to start from the point we have to remember that homelessness is a housing problem, and that the preservation of existing deed-restricted affordable housing is a critical part of the solution. We were regular participants in the task force. I want to commend Housing Commission staff Nader Ho, Wendy DeWitt, and Morgan Marks for their very determined level of participation and continuous communication with the members of the task force. It was a robust process with very significant participation and discussion by all sectors of the housing, the various owners and developers and advocates. I think it was a very diligent effort to enact the will of the council as directed. I will repeat, homelessness is a housing problem. Preservation is an important part of the solution. Truly making preservation work will require resources, and that's something that that we have begun to identify in the report that preceded today's work. But the work has continued to identify that we're going to need significant resources for preservation of existing affordable housing, but we'll also need resources for new production of housing, for rental assistance, and also for preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing. That is on a scale that is almost hard for us to imagine right now, but that's a significant part of the problem. That is not the focus, of course, of today's report. It is strictly the deed restricted. So I just want to say that we want to thank the Housing Commission and staff for your diligence and effort in preparing this, and thank you for the hard work.
Thank you very much. All right, there are no further speaker slips on item 100. We will now, commissioners, any comments or questions? Commissioner Vasquez.
Yes, so my question is regarding the exemption transfer of ownership. My first and main concern is the fact that as I understand it, based off of the executive report and the presentation that was given, this would allow an existing affordable housing complex or unit be transferred by gift to a third party, and then they can and they wouldn't have to go through this process of preservation. And so then that third party or a straw buyer could then, or straw receiver of donation of donated property could then turn around and sell that property, and we wouldn't have any information regarding it. I'm just curious as to why that would be an exception. That seems like it's a loophole.
Thank you for asking that question. We received similar feedback on the collaborative. It was a legal aid comment, and they asked for more specifics on that particular exemption. It's included in state law, so it's not intended to be a loophole. It's intended to reflect maybe some legal gifts, but we do need to clarify it so it doesn't become a loophole. The intent is to simply provide it where it's necessary and not create an opening. So I understand your comment, and we will definitely address that with clarification around this particular exemption. And of course, if it doesn't meet the scrutiny of the stakeholders, then we may end up eliminating it if it's a loophole. So
true and form with what seems to always come up in conversation is PQ Village. The owners of the property in Penasquitos that included former PQ Village is a family from Florida in an LLC that owns many parcels within Penasquitos. And so what I see that could happen with this is that family or whatever trust could then donate their property some of that property that they currently own that are deed restricted to a family member, and then turn around and that family member would be able to sell it at a ridiculous profit. So that would be one of my main concerns. I'm glad that you guys are going to look into it, but off the top of or after reading it and thinking about it for a while, I can't see why it would be reasonable that somebody would be able to donate even to a family member their interest in a covenanted restricted property and not have to go through the proper channels. That person, the family member, has proper notice that that's what's going on. So and the covenants typically run with the land. So the fact that we're cutting that covenant off is definitely problematic for me. Another issue is the sale from a deceased owner. It's basically the same thing. It's just whether or not it's in the life of the owner or after the owner has passed, that they'd be able to gift that property, and this just perpetuates it perpetuates the cycle of people with money being able to keep it, even though it is negative. The distribution of wealth has been disproportionate regarding people's economic status, right? So part of the reason why we're in the problem that we are is because of the fact that we didn't have all of these ordinance established, decades ago to prevent this disproportionate amount of affordable housing available to San Diegans. And so along those same lines, that would be one that I'd like to address as to why we're allowing wealthy people to be able to bequeath property that, again, has covenants that then would be exonerated or wiped out.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. Those would be two very specific examples under the gift that we would want to address.
And then the third issue is the forced sale pursuant by foreclosure. So if we have an entity that has received federal or state funds, taxpayer funds, in order to create or to purchase the property, and then they were to go under foreclosure, why wouldn't we be able to get the first right of refusal so that we, as the Housing Commission, could purchase those properties? What's the rationale of exempting them?
That's a good comment as well. I think the intent was that we can't necessarily stop the foreclosure process, but I understand your comment about having a right of first offer.
And then lastly, the same thing about an exiting LLP partner. What does that have to do with requiring an exemption? A limited partner, you can have a limited liability corporation or limited whether it be limited liability corporation or limited liability partnership, just means that you have one person, you have a general partner and you have a limited liability partner, but that doesn't mean that you can't get a new one. And so again, I see this as a loophole for companies to say, oh, sorry, our limited liability partner is exiting, so now we can sell the property and we don't have to comply with all of these restrictions, and then turn around and replace that limited liability partner with someone else.
The transaction that this is specifically addressing, and maybe not the one that you're talking about, is when at the year 15 tax credit restructuring, when the special limited partner or that investor leaves the partnership because they no longer have the tax advantages, and the general partner stays on, so the control remains unchanged, but that partner exits. So if it were something in addition to that, like you may be describing, then yes, we would want to take a look at that and put more detail onto this particular exemption.
I think you're questioning the exemption. I think what she's questioning is, even in that instance where the 15-year tax credit extent is now leaving.
Gone.
Mm-hmm. Why would because the limited partner that's leaving but the general partner still there, right, why would that create a loophole? I think that's the question, is why should that create a loophole?
Well, at this point, it's the same operating partner. Mm-hmm. For instance, if we're talking about, one of our tax credit partners like Affirmed or Wakeland that has a tax credit financed affordable housing developer, their limited partner would exit at a certain point in time, which is typical under the.
I think we understand. I think what the question is if that creates a risk that we're going to lose that property, deed restricted property, that because of that change, that seems odd because the general partner is still there. So I hear Chuck talking about this. Yeah,
just one thing to keep in mind is the tax limited period is 55 years, but the restriction goes for is 15 years, but the restriction goes for 55 years.
So the general partner can't get out of that restriction.
No, because it binds the entity, and the general partner can go in or out, but you still have the restrictions.
For 55 years. Okay, that makes sense.
I just want to make sure I'm following the discussion here, because I'm not sure that I am. Is the concern here that what we're saying is that because the restrictions would not change with the change in the limited partnership, that there then is no need for the noticing because the restrictions stay in place? Like, I feel like we're kind of talking past each other. So
Yeah.
I think if I'm understanding the answer to your question, it's that the reason for the exemption is that there's no change to the affordability status. And so therefore it is preserved, and then we don't need to notice that there's a partnership change because the affordability is
There's
maintained.
another 40 years of affordability.
If I'm understanding correct.
If that is how it's explained, which again, it's not clear based off of the information
It's
that I
not
received.
detailed here.
Right, then that's okay. I wouldn't have an issue with it. But if it's just the sheer fact that a limited partner, not a limited partner that is a limited partner who is also required for the purpose of the 15-year tax period, but just a limited partner that also seems to have where the limited partner or the LLC has some type of tax restriction, the 15-year tax restriction on it, then, or tax credit, sorry, restriction on it leaves or exits the partnership, then that means that we don't have to notice the tenants about the fact that this person is leaving, and now all the restrictions of the covenant don't apply. And that's what I'm concerned about. And without having the details for that, it's hard to tell, again, if that's the case. Now, if it's as Commissioner Klumpner has explained and our chair explained it, then okay, fine. But otherwise, it's hard. It's difficult to fully understand what the exemptions are for.
Wendy, I'd use the example of in 15 years, but there's a 55-year deed restriction or covenant restriction. There's still another 40 years where the tenants in that building are protected.
Correct. The covenants do not
The covenants don't
change.
change. So I think that's the answer.
And in this transfer situation, at least the one generally described here, the nonprofit owner-operator is not changing either. So it's basically saying that's not really a sale, where the
It's just
operation
a partner is leaving. It's not a sale.
and ownership is not really changing.
Yeah, it's the ownership structure may be changing because one partner
Yes.
leaves.
Yes.
But the covenant still stays in place for 55
Right.
for another 40 years.
Right, but what you're talking about, Commissioner Vasquez, and I believe I understand what you're saying, is that if it goes further than that and erodes who the true owner is, or the one that's going to end up operating the property that might put it at risk at the end of the 55 years, then that should not be allowed as a loophole. So, I mean, those are some specifics that will come when the actual exemptions are drafted for ordinance purposes. And that's why we're going to go back again to stakeholders so that they can kind of run through the actual language and make sure that we definitely don't want to create loopholes. So I'll put it
Well, and I just would
in
like
those
to
words.
add, I really appreciate Commissioner Vasquez, your voice here. You've brought up some really excellent points, potential loopholes that we want to make sure do not exist when the final product is completed. So I want to commit to you that as we continue to move forward, we will continue to check in with you as we start to, as we continue to work with the collaborative to make sure that the language is really tight and that these loopholes aren't left when all is said and done. So we'll continue to loop you in.
If I may ask a couple follow-up questions, because I want to concur with what Mr. Davis just said. I appreciate the scrutiny lens we're looking at this, like finding whatever loopholes may exist here on the front end, and you beat me to the punch. I was going to ask if there was a commitment that this would come back to us when the actual language was hammered out so that we could pin it down more, but I was getting a little bit, I understood that your question, but I want to maybe try to explain this to make sure I am understanding and anybody watching can maybe follow. The preservation that we're talking about here is the affordability level which is different than the ownership, even though those things are sometimes intertwined, but not really always intertwined. And I think what you're getting to as the ownership structure changes, in some cases impact the future affordability, and in some cases don't. And what we want to make sure is that we're covering any scenario in which it would impact the future affordability levels and the corresponding deed restrictions. So just like one of the examples here, the gifting or donating option, I feel like I wasn't quite understanding how that was going, because in the scenario that you, I think, are rightly trying to make sure does not happen, somebody gifts it to an intermediary and therefore dodges the noticing requirements, etc. But if I'm thinking this through, those requirements would still attach to the new owner if they were to change the affordability levels or plan to, or then transfer it again, they would still be subject to the noticing. Is that accurate?
Yes, at the later point in time.
Got it. So if I owned a deed restricted property and I tried to gift it to a sibling of mine, I'm not really avoiding anything, because the sibling, if they plan to change the affordability level, they're right back at square one. Is that?
It's still a deed restricted property that if that sibling intended to sell, would go through this process.
Okay, so under that scenario, it makes perfect sense, and I'm in complete agreement with you that as long as these exemptions are encompassing, or I guess not encompassing any change to the deed restriction, they seem fine. The moment that there is a shimmer of light that the exemption could be used to avoid the noticing when a change in affordability does occur, I think we have to be on high alert to make sure that those aren't there.
The other thing to mention is that state law is still in effect, and similar noticing occurs starting at 3 years before expiration. And then at 1 year, there's another exclusive offer to qualified entities 1 year prior to expiration. So that'll catch a certain number of them. But what the preservation study noted was that majority of property owners have already made up their mind at that point in time. They may have been approached at 6 years prior or 8 years prior to expiration for a sale by somebody who's going to continue to operate it for the other 6 years, but then after that, it'll be market rate. So that's what our local ordinance is trying to do, back that up a little bit, and actually create this right of first offer when there's an intent to sell. That's really when the preservation opportunity arises. And again, these are general policy statements to be addressed in more detail. It's modeled after the existing state law, which we know has been litigated. But we do want to look at it with a local lens. So we appreciate your comments, because we'll have the opportunity to put that in a local ordinance and get to that detail. And when we put the language in ordinance format, and then we will conduct stakeholder meetings again. But we'll definitely stay in touch with you, Commissioner Vasquez, on these exemptions.
Just one more holistic. I very much appreciate the approach that this is taking. One of the things that I've really kind of struggled with the whole preservation conversation, there's a few things that I find kind of challenging, because there are no silver bullets on that. I mean, there is no single answer on these things. And we've seen we're not talking about deed restricted, but we've seen with other types of properties such as SROs, lots of examples where simply the preservation of it is not something that automatically happens, in the sense that, we had a building last year that was a situation because it was condemned, and so we can lose housing without a change in ownership or a change in use, even if it is, technically preserved in some way. The other, I want to emphasize what Mr. Russell pointed to, the need for resources in involved in these properties because properties do decay, the market needs change. The housing that was built 40 years ago, 55 years ago, is not necessarily the same thing that we would want on that site right now, even from an affordable housing standpoint. And those types of changes in keeping up are going to require resources. And I think I don't envy the task that our staff here have when analyzing responses to NOFAs and other resources, because it is a real balancing act between how much it is worth to extend the affordability duration of a property versus what it is to build a new property. And we know that we have to be producing more, but we're on a treadmill if we're just producing more while we're losing the same amount behind us. And so it is a tricky balance to strike, where we have resources allocated in the times that it makes sense for us to invest those resources in preservation while not taking our eye off the ball on production. And what I appreciate about this entire approach and structure that you and the whole stakeholder group has come up with is that a lot of this simply relies on transparency and noticing and alerting potential sources of funding and resources, potential affordable, owners that have affordability in mind and specialize in that, making sure people are aware of the opportunities and giving a competitive edge to any type of change that is going to extend affordability, as opposed to letting those things slip through the crack and a higher end market party beat us to the punch on that. And so that seems like, in the absence of having a funding source that doesn't exist right now, and in the absence of really onerous regulations that I would worry would put us into more types of situations where we have other bad effects, this seems like the best general approach, assuming that we can make sure that there's not any glaring loopholes that people march through. So thank you.
If I could follow up. Yes, so what I'm concerned about is the San Diego Housing Commission not having notice as to who is the owner of the property, and keeping that communication going. So at any of those transfers, I understand as far as the noticing of other, transfers of property, et cetera, I'm concerned that that they aren't going to notify us about these transfers, and that makes it difficult for us to track the sales, right? So I would like it, regardless of what type of exemptions occur in the transfer of property, that we are still notified about that information, because otherwise it makes it impossible for us to track it. Secondly, I just want to remind everybody that not every single covenant is at 55 years. That was a recent ordinance that passed, and so we have projects where it's only 15 years or 10 years. PQ Village was a prime example of that. It was 20 years, and then they bumped it up for 10 years, and then they bumped it up again. So I just want to make sure that we don't assume that every covenant is 55 years or more, and that we are mindful that there is that because we didn't have these ordinances in place, we need to account for the ways the property has been encumbered with these different covenants at the different federal and state levels. And also be crystal clear that just because the transfer of ownership doesn't require a notice of some sort to the tenants, et cetera. I don't understand why they wouldn't. When you purchase property, when you have your mortgage and the lender sells the servicing to another lender, you're required to be noticed as to who that lender is, who now holds the note or at least the servicing. So I don't know why we wouldn't still notice people that are living in those projects, so they know who to contact if they got a problem with the property, and who their point of contact is. I don't understand that part, but I get under not having all of the list of requirements be required from the owner of the affordable or of the property that's encumbered, but some of them still I think should be notified. One being number one being a notice to all the parties involved as to what's going on with the property. It is it is incredibly important, we've all talked about this, that it's incredibly important for preservation's purposes that the people that care about this are notified about what's going on. The Housing Commission staff works tirelessly to make sure that people have housing. And so I don't want to add an additional burden by exempting people from this notification process.
All right. I think you've heard that this is of great interest to the commission, and I look forward to seeing the language and the final terms. The one thing I will note, I will echo and double down on what Commissioner Vasquez just said. I think I'm more worried about the process and the structure in place to make sure the residents are well informed about potential change and their rights. I think I have become more concerned in the last year that people are coming up with new ways to just sprinkle the topic out there, and that's not fair, and it creates unfortunate situations. And so, like even in the draft, what you've sent us is that I think it says that you can either be notified by first-class mail or electronically. I think, Wendy, that has to be both. I think that that I can see that going in the wrong direction. Well, we mailed something. Well, we did what you said, and you gave us an option, and I'm not saying that people are going to, stretch that a bit, but some people might stretch that a bit. So I think it should be both, and I think that that upon that mailing happening and the electronic notification happening, that there be a CC to the commission. So just keep that in mind. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just in closing, last pieces, I do think that when the notification happens, that every term and requirement be provided to the tenant, so that they know exactly what their rights are and where to call if they have questions.
We intend to do template notices that would, follow this program, that would have that, and this would be, the Housing Commission is also notified, the local government entities, as well as the tenants, as well as the qualified entities.
Okay.
They would all be a part of this noticing process because, as you noted, you're correct, under the state law, the tenants get noticed when there's a potential rent increase, but they have no idea if the property's being sold.
Change hands.
So
All right.
that would be, again, a purpose of having a local ordinance that required that. So
Right.
we appreciate your detailed comments on this so we can make sure they're included.
Thank you very much. Appreciate both of you today, and good job. We look forward to seeing the final terms. All right. That is everything. There's no action required on this. It was informational, so no motion or action is necessary. We will now go on to item 101, and I have 2 speaker slips that have been submitted. We will take public comments after the staff presentation. It's not a day of talking about housing, and you're already smiling unless Asu comes up and gives us great news. So we will move to our presentation on item 101, the informational workshop and discussion about Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, and Executive Vice President of Rental Assistance and Workforce Development, Asu and Senior Vice President of Rental Assistance, Carrie Bell, will present this item. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy to be here. All right. Well, we are pleased to have an opportunity to provide an overview of the San Diego Housing Commission's Rental Assistance Program. This morning, we will provide you with an in-depth presentation of the program's intricacies, from waitlist to continued assistance, specifically from a participant's viewpoint. Due to the complexity of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, the overview will be provided in 3 presentations. Not today. Over time, yeah. Today we will cover part 1, the process from waitlist application to initial move-in under the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. In fiscal year 2023, the Housing Commission provided rental assistance to more than 19,000 households, including households that exited the program at some point during the year, which consisted of more than 38,000 individuals. We dispersed $250 million to more than 5,000 participating landlords on behalf of our rental assistance families. The families assisted through the rental assistance programs represent some of the most vulnerable populations in the city. Of the families who receive rental assistance, 64% are elderly disabled households. The average annual income of all voucher holders is just $21,709. And the average annual income for work-able households is $34,642. 83% of assisted households are considered extremely low income, which means their income is less than or equal to 30% of San Diego's area median income. To apply for the Housing Commission's rental assistance programs, households are encouraged to apply through our rental assistance waitlist portal, which is accessible on our website. While our portal is the primary method for receiving applications for assistance, the Housing Commission also accepts waitlist applications by phone for those who might not have access to the internet or are elderly disabled. The functionality of the online portal allows clients to have 24/7 access to their application information. When a household is on a rental assistance waitlist, applicants must notify the Housing Commission of any address changes and must respond to any waitlist updates requests that we send. The Housing Commission conducts waitlist updates periodically to ensure a viable list of applicants. If an applicant fails to respond to a waitlist update, the applicant will be removed from all waitlists. Requests for reinstatement to the waitlist are allowed up to 24 months after removal, and exceptions are made in extenuating circumstances. The most recent waitlist update commenced on December 5th, 2022, and is still ongoing. Once a family applies to the Housing Choice Voucher waitlist, the family is prioritized by the date and time of their application was submitted, as well as by Housing Commission preferences. These preferences include living or working in the city of San Diego, being a family with 2 or more people that include a dependent, or being single individuals who are disabled, elderly, a veteran, or active duty service person. While the Housing Commission assisted over 19,000 households last year, many additional families also need help. This is an issue nationwide. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, only 1 in 4 households eligible for rental assistance across the country actually receive it. Due to limited funding, the Housing Commission is not able to meet the demand of people seeking assistance within the city of San Diego. This is reflected in our Housing Choice Voucher rental assistance waitlist, which now has an approximate wait time of 12 to 15 years. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development requires every public housing authority to ensure that 75% of its new rental assistance admissions in each fiscal year are families with income at or below 30% AMI. Our waitlist selection process ensures we meet this goal by income targeting lower income families on the waitlist. The remaining 25% of new admissions may be between 31 and 80% AMI. Once we have confirmed the preference criteria for the family, we proceed to verify if the family meets HUD and Housing Commission criteria for eligibility. These include, but not limited to, HUD income limits, a criminal background check, and verifying there are no previous terminations from the Housing Choice Voucher program. Additional eligibility criteria are shown here. After the verification process is completed, the Housing Commission makes a final determination of eligibility. If a family is eligible, they must complete an intake briefing. After successfully completing the briefing, the family is issued a voucher and begins their housing search. If the family is ineligible, the Housing Commission sends the applicant a notice of denial and an opportunity for informal review.
The HUD required intake briefing explains to the family how the program works and their responsibilities. It also connects them with the resources as they begin their housing search. This will enable them to use the program to their advantage and will prepare them to discuss it with potential landlords. During the intake briefing, the client will receive their voucher and their moving papers, otherwise known as a request for tenancy approval or an RFTA. The families will also be provided with information on the payment standards and utility allowance chart, along with the resource options for our mobility counseling program. A voucher is a document that allows a family to search for a housing unit to rent under the Housing Choice Voucher program. The initial term of the voucher is 120 days. Voucher extensions may be granted to families who need additional time to find a rental housing unit. Extensions are granted in increments of an additional 60 days up to 300 days total. A family must find a rental housing unit and turn in their RFTA before the Housing Choice Voucher expires. If the voucher expires, it is closed, the family does not receive assistance, and the voucher may become available for another family. Choice Communities is the Housing Commission's upward mobility initiative. It was implemented in 2010 with the goal of creating increased access for Housing Choice Voucher families to move into communities that offer more opportunities for education, employment, and quality of life. Under Choice Communities, the City of San Diego zip codes are divided into 3 groups, each with its own payment standards. There's Choice Communities, Enterprise Communities, and Signature Communities. Higher payment standards are set in areas with higher market rents, providing families with more flexibility to move into those communities. The Housing Commission offers incentives to relocate to Choice and Enterprise communities. These incentives include higher payment standards, a security deposit loan program, and our mobility counseling program. Here you'll see a map and a breakdown of zip codes among Choice, Enterprise, and Signature communities. We created a mobility counseling program to help with pre- and post-move counseling, housing search assistance, and virtual guidance about neighborhood features for families moving to Choice and Enterprise communities. Mobility counselors engage new landlords to enlist new rental units into the Housing Choice Voucher program and also act as a liaison for the landlord and the participant during the move process. Additionally, we provide no-interest security deposit loans for families who move into a Choice or Enterprise community. In fiscal year 2023, 1,622 families moved into Choice and Enterprise communities. We issued 261 security deposit loans and enrolled 372 new landlords on the Housing Choice Voucher program. The payment standard is the maximum subsidy payment that the Housing Choice Voucher would pay for a rental unit minus the applicable tenant portion of the contract rent. Families pay a predetermined amount of the contract rent, and the Housing Commission pays the remainder of the contract rent up to the applicable payment standard directly to the landlord. The payment standard is based on the number of bedrooms approved for the family size and the community to which the family moves. The number of bedrooms assigned to a Housing Choice Voucher is determined by the family size and according to Housing Commission policies. This chart shows the maximum subsidy a family can receive based on their voucher payment standard. Once a family is determined eligible and attends a briefing and receives a voucher and RFTA, they can start the move-in process. When a client identifies a prospective unit, they provide the landlord with the RFTA packet. This packet has the information and forms required to start the move process. The landlord or the client must return the completed RFTA along with a copy of an unexecuted lease agreement to the Housing Commission. Staff will review both the RFTA packet and the lease agreement to ensure both meet the following criteria. The rent does not exceed what the family can afford to pay. There are no conflicts with program rules. The initial lease term is at least 6 months, and the lease agreement outlines which party is responsible for utilities and appliances. When the Housing Commission determines that the RFTA packet and lease agreement meet the required criteria, the unit will be scheduled for an inspection. Housing Commission staff will contact the landlord to schedule an appointment within 1 business day and conduct the inspection within 2 business days. All housing units occupied by the Housing Choice Voucher rental assistance participants must meet certain health and safety criteria called housing quality standards set by HUD. When the unit passes the inspection and the rent amount is approved, the tenant can move in. Housing Commission staff will issue the final documents for execution. The Housing Assistance Payments Contract and Lease Addendum will need to be signed and returned before payments begin. Lastly, step 4, once the contract and lease are signed and returned, the Housing Commission will process the initial payment. The payment will be directly deposited into the landlord's bank account each month. The Housing Commission continues to issue payments if the unit continues to meet housing quality standards and the assisted family meets eligibility criteria and complies with program rules and regulations. During their continued assistance, landlords, participants have the responsibility they need to uphold, have responsibilities they need to uphold. Their responsibilities are shown on this slide. We plan to return next month to next month's board meeting to provide an overview of the program, details for continued Housing Choice Voucher Program assistance, and a summary of our special programs. Azucena and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
Comments, questions?
I have a silly question.
There's no silly question.
Well,
Should I give you some parameters? Okay, go ahead.
I promise it's on topic.
Okay.
It's germane to the conversation. So can you please tell me what the definition or the difference between an SRO and a zero-bedroom unit is?
Yep. Yep. So an SRO would be a unit that typically would not maybe have a bathroom attached to it. Yes. And then a zero bedroom would be like a studio. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
But doesn't HUD require, I thought we had this conversation, Jeff and Emily, HUD now requires that they have to have bathrooms for SROs in the future ordinance going forward in the city, they're going to have bathrooms or not?
The SROs still have to have access to kitchen and bathroom facilities. It could be a community-style bathroom or a kitchen. It doesn't have to be within the specific unit.
Okay. So the SRO, I guess the question I had was, they're now required to be 350 square feet, nothing less than that.
Under the voucher program, it's 200. I think it's in the 200 square feet range, so it's small for the SROs. The units in total to meet housing quality standards has to have a minimum square footage of 214, I think.
Okay, I thought I heard that it changed. That's why I was checking. All right.
The only additional comment is, I guess the SROs are like dormitories, right?
They could be seen as dormitories. They do have shared facilities, yeah.
All right, we have a couple of public comments. My apologies on this one. We have one. Item 101 is Joy Senyata. This is not.
That Mr. Marshall is so great. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Joy Senyata, District 3. First of all, before I give you my personal testimonial on Section 8, Azucena and team, love you. It's beyond what you do. $329 million, 17,000 households with low income. And I loved the wording from a client's perspective. Wow, thank you on that. So, Section 8, I want to tell you what happens out in the world. And I love Section 8, and it's fabulous. Believe me, it's fabulous. It doesn't have a good reputation out in the world on the street. And I don't have a personal testimonial I can give you, but I've been on the street talking with people for 17 years. The people that do live in Section 8 love Section 8. It's stringent, which is great. And there's regulations, and they have to abide to them. And all of that is, the tenants really appreciate it, that live in it, and they follow the rules, generally speaking. But on the street, what's the matter with Section 8? It has a very negative opinion. I just want you to know that. It's not mine. But just the other day in City Council, I think it was, just this week, a young woman and I spoke in the lobby, and she had been on the list for 14 years. And she had no idea what was going on. And she did speak at the microphone finally. It was very courageous on her part, first time ever. And so I think we need to go out and clean up that somehow. I don't know how to do it, but I think your outreach into the community needs to give us a new view of Section 8 because it is fabulous. It's one of our gems. It's very old, and I love it, but let's look at that. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to take Imani R.
Well, you just got your request because I am a real live person that is having an issue with Section 8. I am on Section 8, and I am waiting for a court date for being evicted. So in 2022, January, day before my birthday, I was fired from my job for not getting the COVID due to my beliefs. And the day on my birthday, I actually received COVID from a vaccinated person. After losing my job, I was denied unemployment, and I appealed it, and I won. And in that time, I was communicating with Section 8 that I no longer had the income that they were asking me to provide to my landlord. And I received a letter just about exactly a year ago, September 14, 2022, that this is in response to your recent letter reporting a change of income. No change will be made to your rent portion at this time because you did not provide the requested information. So assuming that I had to continue bringing in information, I did so. As my rent continuously accumulated and I continued to pay a portion of the rent that I could as unemployed, disabled, and dealing with someone with a disability. 30 days ago, well, even prior to that, I got my recertification. So I started that process, turned in that paperwork, and I was thinking in my head, oh, well, because so much time passed, they just want me to recertify and then do it all in one process. So I sent my worker. So during all of this time, my landlord decided not to accept my rent anymore because I kept speaking with him saying, I'm working it out with Section 8. We're coming up with the rent. I haven't worked. I'm giving in the paperwork. I'm working with Section 8. They decided to not accept my rent and move forward with the rent or quit. I sent that information to my worker, and I got a response back stating that I had a new worker, and everyone was on board because, oh my gosh, you're getting a rent or quit. So then in that time, I was told 15 days from today, or about 20 days from today, that they had no intention of lowering my rent because of the status of my employment. And I stated I appealed, and I actually got unemployment. And my new worker stated that we had no intention. So it would have been great if on September 14, 2022, if there was no intention of changing my rent due to my employment status, it would have been great, instead of stating that they just needed more paperwork. And so now I'm continuing on, and they needed information from my son. He is in medical care at this time. And then they stated that, oh, we could lower the rent because of your son being disabled. They've known my son being disabled for years. They've known that I've had a disability and never offered for me to lower my rent because of our disabilities. So I'm just extremely frustrated. I think the whole program is working the opposite. San Diego Housing Commission has one of the best home buying programs in the country, and that is not encouraged. It is definitely penalized. I just think that we're looking at this wrong. I think we should look at renters. And one thing about, you talked about penalizing the wealthy. The difference between the poor and the wealthy is simply information. And it would be great if we would have the program to uplift the poor and being able to get them into home ownership, and instead of being penalized and because this housing program at this point in time is creating homelessness. When Dr. Benson Carson was overhousing and he decided to put fire under the feet of the participants and simply raise the rent just up to just put fire under our feet to get us going. And I made the comment that I can't afford this new change. And I was told by the case manager, well, then you should just move, which of course me moving wouldn't have anything to do with the change of the rent. So I understand this is a program, but we are people. And I'm simply waiting for a date for court to get evicted as a participant on the Section 8 program. So this is why on the streets it's not working out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments.
We will follow up with the participant to provide.
You know what I was thinking. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
Okay. All right. Commissioner Klempner?
I just want to address both public comments briefly, and then I have some questions. I want to make clear that we welcome any Section 8 participants to comment, whatever their comments may be, whether they're having problems, have complaints. We've heard positive stories previously. I think it's important for us to let the public know that our door is open, and at the same time also we have a lot of constraints. If staff or council want to weigh in here, we can't really get into the details of discussing specific cases in a public forum for a number of reasons, the most important being the privacy of the individuals involved. So for anybody watches, I just want to kind of note those two things. I think what both of the comments made clear is that this is a severely under-resourced program if we zoom out. And if you could go back to the prioritization slide. Yeah, the preferences, the list of hold on, let me tell you what slide I'm thinking of here. The one that had the list of, I think I'm looking for a different slide here.
Is it where they can live, right here?
No. The one that had how we prioritize applications, disabilities, seniors, veterans.
Right here.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. In the simplest terms, I think we would all prefer to not have a preference list that forced choices to be made between whether one person gets housing or doesn't based on the need. On that list is somebody experiencing homelessness with a disability, right? Like, we're down to the granular level of prioritizing people who are homeless and have a disability over people who are just homeless in all of these programs. Those are distinctions that are forced, that none of you in the staff, none of us on the board would ever be delineating if we had our choice here. And so I completely understand the frustration, because if you are, somebody on one of those items, or somebody who's not on one of those items just has a qualifying income, and the reason why it is taking forever and you may potentially never receive a voucher is because there are people with more severe circumstances ahead of you. That is a very unsatisfactory answer, and it shouldn't be a satisfactory answer. But the reality here is that we only have so many vouchers to go around, and these are the kinds of awful decisions that just have to be built in so that we are allocating resources in some sort of coherent way. And so I just want to kind of recognize that. I think that those frustrations are valid. I think it's important for us to be really honest with the public. When we have permanent supportive housing projects coming forward and we're attaching vouchers to those, that is incredibly important. We know that permanent supportive housing is the best option for chronically homeless in particular, and we also know that those vouchers are being spoken for, and they're not up for grabs for other people from that point forward. And those are the trade-offs that I think we just need to be honest with the public. We wouldn't have to make those trade-offs if we had other resources available, but we don't. We don't have a local funding stream to fund these programs, and we don't have any kind of meaningful increases coming from either the state or the federal government when it comes to these vouchers. And so that is the problem. Part of what makes that really tragic is that this program is working very well. Especially in San Diego. So, I want to acknowledge the frustration because I think it's valid. I also want to point out that we have a lot of things that are going very smoothly that many other cities struggle with greatly. I've spoken about this before, but can you tell me how many people return their vouchers because they're unable to use them within that 300-day time frame?
So on a annual basis, we do receive requests from about 270 households per year to extend their voucher. We typically approve about 250 of those extensions. However, about 90 of those families tend to let their vouchers expire and not use it to place into a unit. We typically find that's the case when we initially issue the voucher and not necessarily throughout the program. We, believe it or not, we actually do have households who are pulled from the waiting list and for one reason or another determine that they are not going to utilize them for rental housing. Either because the subsidy amount is too low, they were hoping to get more of a subsidy, or it's just not the right fit for them. They're either moving or their circumstances have changed. So the majority of the 90 is where we see it at the initial issuance
and
of voucher.
Then remind me, out of the total number of people receiving vouchers, what is that number?
Currently, we're at about 17,258.
Okay, so we've got about 90 a year out of 17,000. And just for context, there's cities in this country where it is near impossible to utilize a voucher that you get because the payment standard is so low that they cannot find, there are not a sufficient number of properties and landlords that will accept that payment. And I think what you all have done an exceptional job at is keeping those payment standards. And if you could go to the map as well. Yeah, keeping those payment standards up to speed with our market so that number is very low. And I think with that number 90 out of 17,000, that's a really good number. That means that the vast majority of people who have a voucher are able to find a place to utilize it with the payment standards that we have, which is a huge success story. The downside of that is that we're paying more per voucher so that people can use it, and we don't have as many to go around. And so again, this, I think that we're landing on the correct, or what my preference would be, side of this equation. If I have to choose between us having resources go unspent because people spend months and months and months taking their voucher from one landlord to the next and everybody saying no, versus we give them a voucher that they're able to use, I think it's important that we give people vouchers that they're able to use. And the problem and the frustration that we hear is that we don't have enough of those to go around. And that's a valid complaint, but this is structured in a way that I think is doing the best we can with the resources that we have available. And the other thing that I would point out with this, could you flip to the map version? I'm going to have you come back to this one. I'm going to just keep you busy here. Yeah, that map. So the signature communities historically is where almost all of the vouchers went if you go back 20, 30 years, probably even less than that, to be honest. And I think it's really important for us to recognize, because especially as these policies are changing, there's always the possibility that we make mistakes that have been made historically. If we were to just prioritize the number of households we could serve with affordable housing, and that was the only criteria we looked at, we could probably produce more. We could produce more on the production front, we could produce more on the voucher front, and we would do that by focusing all of our resources in the lowest land cost areas, which would be, in practice, the areas that historically were redlined and segregated for communities of color and lower income communities. We are very smartly and appropriately trying to move away from that and undo those constructs. And this map is the reflection of programs designed to undo historical segregation that took place in housing programs. And I think that we are being successful. I think you had it on a slide as well. How many households are in the choice and enterprise communities?
We don't have that slide, but I can confirm that more than 50% of our total voucher population is living within an enterprise or choice communities, which are areas of opportunities. The Choice Communities Initiative, the slides that we have up, that was established in 2010, has been successful in moving over 7,000 of our households into an enterprise or choice communities. Again, accessing higher opportunities for education, transportation, employment, medical access.
That is a tremendous success story. And again, that is a success story that is uncommon amongst major cities in this country, unfortunately. And to Joy's, I think, very valid point about the perceptions around Section 8, this is something that we have to recognize. This is a problem. There are discriminatory views, prejudiced views about Section 8, about the people who are utilizing Section 8, about what they are like as neighbors and as tenants. And I think it's really important for people to understand, because the vast majority of the public does not understand what a housing choice voucher is, as opposed to what they have in their head about the late 1960s and projects. And this is the complete opposite of that. When people move into your neighborhood holding a Section 8 housing choice voucher, for the most part, nobody has any idea. Nobody has any idea. They are just a member of the community. Their landlord is getting the same amount of rent, and that is what we should be aiming for. And the fact that people don't know, how many of their neighbors are receiving Section 8 assistance, it speaks to the success. However, it also makes it really hard for people to get it into their heads that this program does not work the way that their negative stereotypes may be suggesting to them. And so I want to recognize, what an accomplishment it is that this city is desegregating its affordable housing, that it is encouraging housing, and I think we have a long ways to go. So this in no way is going to mean that I won't have suggestions as things come up down the road about how we go further with that, but that is a really important accomplishment. And again, our problem here is that we don't have enough to go around, and it creates just horrific choices that have to be made about levels of need that I think none of us, staff, commissioners, city council on up, I don't think any of us are okay with the fact that we have to be making those decisions, but we have to triage this crisis, and that's the reality. And the solution to that, to not having to make those difficult triaging decisions, is that we invest more resources into these programs, because they are working as designed. So thank you.
Commissioner Vasquez.
Thank you. I have one question, and I'll reserve follow-up questions. To Commissioner Klumper's point that we don't have enough vouchers, Chair Mitchell explained to us a couple months ago that part of the main reason why San Diego City can't get additional vouchers, regardless of our need, is because San Diego County has outstanding vouchers that aren't being used. I was curious as to whether or not we've been able to work in tandem or help support the San Diego County Commission in identifying potential voucher users and helping them use the unused vouchers, I don't know how else to word it, so that we could then potentially get more vouchers in the future. Has that been discussed?
And the context for this was Congressman Levin on the Chamber DC trip, in which Lisa, I think, was there, Molly with her. I specifically asked, I said, we are the shining example of, as Vice Chair Klumper has noted, of how you run a voucher program, but we need more. And the response that obviously is clear in the minds of the congressional delegation is they're not going to get more until the County of San Diego is maximizing their program.
So the amount of funding that housing authorities receive for their voucher program is determined on a federal level by Congress. So it isn't narrowed down by a specific jurisdiction, by county, by state. It does come at a congressional federal level. So until our Congress can allocate additional funding or additional vouchers that are typically applicable across the country, our voucher program and our voucher funding typically remains unchanged. And that's the case for the county, for the city of San Diego.
So I would ask this question then, what the congressman seems to be indicating is if the county was maximizing their program, it'd be much easier for them as delegation to go and ask HUD for more money for us.
I think there's a little bit of confusion here. I think what they were speaking of are VASH vouchers. The county is not able to use the VASH vouchers that they have to the same level that we have been able to use them. The county is using as much, they are also oversubscribed on their voucher program. Theirs, I think, is in a financial sense, but it's not fair to the county to say that they're not using their typical voucher program to the extent that they can. While I have the mic, I just wanted to, kind of add to something. I really appreciate Commissioner Klumpner's comments on the voucher program. He's so articulately expressed, the conflict that we have trying to balance the different demands. And, do we need more vouchers? Oh my God, yes. Do we want to raise our payment standards? Yes, absolutely. Can we do those things? No, we don't have any more vouchers. And to raise the payment standards any farther would be to serve even less families. But I just kind of wanted to express on behalf of the staff, nobody is more frustrated by those two facts than staff. We do hear the complaints. They do affect us. It frustrates us more than anybody that we are not able to give better news to the families that need assistance. And I just kind of wanted to make sure that was clear.
And thanks for the clarification. I think even with that clarification, I would say, going back to what Commissioner Vasquez just said, is there a way to work with the county on the VASH vouchers? Because the vouchers help. So can we partner with the county to help them maximize? And then I do believe that Jeff has heard me say this before. I think this has become a state issue. I think that if we can maximize the VASH vouchers in the county, I think we have every right. There's every reason for us to get the congressional delegation on board with making the request that we receive additional support. And this is the perfect delegation request, and it should be everybody. When you look at the list of people and the prioritization, because we are a high cost of living community. I've always made the argument that you can't look at every city through the same lens. Last check, I think we're up nearly 1,200 people year over year from July of last year to July of this year. And people are still moving here and people are still moving out, but it doesn't change the situation. We're still a high cost of living community. And so we should be doing everything we can as an organization to say we need more, and that should be official, right? It should be letter. And I would say that if there's a letter that needs to be sent to the congressional delegation that describes the situation, that asks them for direction on what we should do, then we should send that letter, and I'd be happy to sign it. But I think having this conversation of we're maximizing a program and getting as much as we can out of it. When I joined the commission, the waiting list was 11 years. Now it's 12 to 15. We're going in the wrong direction. So yes, I want to say I agree with everything Commissioner Klumpner said. He said it eloquently. The struggle in this region to build housing is always tough, but if you attach a low-income housing phrase on it or a Section 8 housing phrase on it, then all you get is opposition, right? So that's the unfortunate part. But the reality is we're going to have to build a lot more of it. We're going to have to secure a lot more of it. And I just think that we should be doing everything now that we can to continue to make the case that we need more. And it doesn't do us any good to have this report and not have any actions on it. So I think that that's something we have to, I would suggest that, Jeff, we could talk about this, but we need to let the congressional delegation know now that we're willing to help the county on VASH if we can. But in the end, we need more.
One more thing. I'm looking at, let's see, this is slide 16, and make it easier for you instead of describing what's on it. Thank you. Okay, so to put this in layman's terms here, obviously there's a significant range of values on these vouchers going from, the lower left corner, an SRO in a signature community, $941, a 5-bedroom in a choice community, $6,000. Obviously would be for a very large family. I'd be surprised if we have any of those, but but both of those would get counted as a voucher if you were receiving either of those, even though there's a significant difference between them, right? So part of what determines the number of people we're able to serve is the housing configuration here. And where I'm going with this is the SRO, even between the SRO and the studio, there's a significant difference in terms of the cost. And an even bigger difference, if we're comparing a choice community SRO to a choice community 1-bedroom, which could very well be serving the same person, there's a nearly $1,000 difference there in terms of the level of assistance. I noticed that in the current housing action plan at the city, they're removing the development impact fee waiver from small studio, which I think would apply to both SROs and studios under $500. They're removing that fee waiver. I'm a bit concerned about this because, one, those units, I think that we're thinking about those units outside the context of affordable housing. And has anybody here been asked about what the potential impact on affordable housing would be? I think that policy is being thought of not with its impact on affordable housing. Housing choice vouchers can and are being used in unrestricted market rate properties disproportionately in the studio and 1-bedroom realm, where there's more often a match between the payment standard and the market rate. If I'm incorrect about this, please somebody jump in and tell me that.
So the majority of our vouchers are in 2 bedrooms.
Thank you. That is very helpful.
1 bedrooms,
Okay.
3 bedrooms, yeah.
Got it. How much of that has to do with the availability of 2 bedrooms as compared to, for example, we know that we have a drastically dwindling SRO stock?
I think it has more to do with choice.
Okay.
So based on the family size, we will issue a voucher with a minimum of a 1-bedroom. So families can choose to live in a SRO or in a studio, but if you have the voucher that can put you into a 1-bedroom, you're more than likely going to choose that for yourself or your family.
Okay. My next question may be a crossover between you both and Lisa Jones. From our people who are exiting homelessness with a housing choice voucher, do we have any information about what type of housing they are utilizing those vouchers in from a bedroom perspective?
I think from a bedroom perspective, the majorities are in studios and 1-bedrooms for our permanent supportive housing models. And that's typically because they're mostly in project-based vouchers. We also offer tenant-based vouchers for some of our permanent supportive housing, but we typically see studios and 1-bedrooms.
Is that the main way that people who are exiting homelessness, they're going into project-based vouchers as opposed to housing choice vouchers, or is it a mix?
Permanent supportive housing and most of our project-based, those projects.
Lisa, your mic.
Is it on? Oh, there we go. When we couple our vouchers with permanent supportive housing resources, that's almost always in a community specifically, right, to Azucena's point. So those, unless that community that comes to the board for approval is doing studios and 1-bedrooms, which we do a mix of, but they're generally a 1-bedroom or a studio. Tenant-based vouchers, they have choice, but Azucena mentioned earlier, they're getting a 1-bedroom voucher issued to them, so they're probably going to look for a 1-bedroom unit for the tenant-based.
I see. Okay. So there may not be quite the clear answer that I was hoping for here, which is fair. We live in the complex details here. I guess, my concern would be, and actually part of the main thing that makes this a hard conversation to have is that we're doing so much project-based vouchers that is the strategy for permanent supportive housing. We don't have permanent supportive housing with portable vouchers involved by nature. I guess kind of what I'm getting at is I would be concerned to see a drop off in SRO and studio production given our homelessness issue, and I'm a bit fearful that the direction that the city is going in terms of when I was watching the Land Use and Housing Committee hearing on this, the description was basically, we have plenty of studios getting built. We don't need this. I would be worried that if we were wrong about that and the studio production dropped off, that we would end up with a market that was less conducive to getting people out of homelessness.
So let's set voucher assistance aside, right? Because we kind of know where that lands. That lands with the project-based vouchers. That's how we do PSH. What you're bringing up is more what we're dealing with when we are trying to get people into housing that don't have a subsidy or don't have a traditional voucher subsidy.
And just for our context here, the majority of people who leave housing don't go into permanent supportive housing. They go into either no subsidy or a more shallow subsidy.
So in rapid rehousing programs, they're going to look at the most affordable. In prevention or diversion, or they have a short-term flexible subsidy. So our prevention diversion teams, our rapid rehousing teams, both the city, the commissions, and our provider partners, they're always looking for that affordable resource. And certainly we have seen through our prevention diversion, even our SRO stock getting more expensive, right? What's left is getting more expensive. Most of the folks that come through the Housing Instability Prevention Program are over 55 years of age and have a disability, about 70% that come through that program. And their rent is $1,500 to $1,600 on average, and their income isn't much more. So any loss of studios and SROs are going to disproportionately impact, obviously, low-income populations, but also seniors, right? And a lot of the folks experiencing homelessness, for sure.
Yeah, our TAY population comes to mind as well. Okay, well, that was a little bit less of a straight line between our housing choice vouchers and what is getting built out there where they might be using the vouchers, but I appreciate you following along with my line of thought there. I'll quit while I'm only slightly behind.
I don't have any. I don't have it. I have one specific comment that's a comment question. I just in looking at the enterprise communities on the map, and I was more surprised to see the difference in payments or in voucher payments between the 5-bedroom for choice and the 5-bedroom from enterprise, and more so because I looked at the communities that are enterprise, and it seems like it's a significant gap.
So the payment standards are higher where the rental costs are more expensive, and that's done very intentionally so that we can help families better afford to live in areas of opportunities.
Yeah, I get that. I think I was more shocked because, for instance, 92037 is enterprise, and I can't imagine that the rental costs there are cheaper than Rancho Bernardo or some of the others. It stood out to me. I mean, I'm sure that you guys that you all have looked at at what's best, but it did stand out a little bit when you look at the communities that are included under choice versus enterprise. I will end with this comment. I think today's conversation about this was really important and was wonderful. Again, I'll repeat what I said to Vice Chair Clement about Vice Chair Clement. I thought his comments were dead on about the perception issue. I continue to be concerned about the disconnect maybe between the fact and reality on this issue about studios and studios and one bedrooms. When we get projects here that we're approving, I always look at the list. What's happening? What we've heard in the past is that the biggest request is for 2 bedrooms, and we've heard that at this meeting on a regular basis. I think as we're gonna postpone our strategic plan discussion until the next meeting, because I think we have to really dive in on the strategic plan of what we're setting as our course. Information flow is important, and Vice Chair Klempner is correct. The council is about to make an important decision around production of a specific type. I hope that there is a conversation happening between the commission and the people working on that, because you have real-time insight. And it's logical that someone moving from homelessness on the street isn't, when we had an abundance of SROs, there was a reason why they were being utilized, right? The city of San Diego, and this is not the existing council, the city of San Diego made a conscious decision in the 2000 to 2004 range to focus on redeveloping downtown with high-rise units that were far more expensive at the expense of basic level shelter for people who are income restrained. And we're seeing this impact now. I know that the mayor has mentioned that we need to focus on more SROs. I think that part of our role as the commission is to provide some insight consistently, but more importantly, we have to create a communication structure that says this is what we're seeing as far as the need. Again, we see the projects that come before us. We hear that 2 bedrooms are the most requested, but when you look on the street and you look at the navigation center and who's coming in, that would seem to point to something different. And I think Vice Chair Klempner is right. When you're talking about getting rid of an exemption on a fee, that's not going to incentivize the construction of 1 bedrooms and studios. It doesn't. And so I think what our role is and our responsibility is to this crisis is to provide our own firm opinion of what we think will help, not hinder. And I think it's clear that we need more 1 bedroom and studio units. SDSU West is going to build 4,100 units. Are any of those 1 bedroom and studios? Probably not. When we're having this conversation about the Midway development, we had a conversation with them about how many of those units are going to be 1 bedroom or studios. The Spaywar development that's coming, are we having that conversation? So I think we have to be more aggressive as an organization. You too have tremendous insight into this. Lisa Jones, you have tremendous insight into this. And I think, I hate getting emotional about this, but it just bothers me when we're not. I think that we have to put a realistic perspective on this crisis. And while there are some people who do need a 4-bedroom or a 5-bedroom, what we have to think about is what do we need right now to really address this crisis? And you're always going to have a situation where there are people who need just a studio or a 1-bedroom. And if you're getting rid of all of them, we're not learning from the mistakes of the past. If you're disincentivizing the creation of more, we're not learning from the mistakes of the past. And again, that wasn't this current city council's decision to stop focusing on SROs. But, we own this. When you look around downtown and you see units that are selling for $700,000, $800,000, and you see units that are selling for $1 million, and you see all these people flying, they go, you guys have plenty of housing that people of a certain income can afford. And everybody else is just flat out screwed. And I think that's what I hope when we have the strategic plan discussion, Lisa. I think we have a responsibility as an organization to present some thoughts for consideration about that really tie in with what we're seeing on voucher requests, exiting homelessness. Those are all important components. And I think the city council will welcome it. We just have to be better about it. So, all right, if there are no further questions, comments, again, thank you for your presentation today. This is a part 1. We'll see you again. We have 2 more parts, and I think we all look forward to it. But we're going to move the strategic plan informational workshop to the next meeting. I think it based on this conversation we just had, we need to spend more time in the strategic plan discussion looking at where we should be headed. And I think we need everybody here for that conversation. So, all right. Thank you very much for, yes.
As I say, thank you for your leadership on the matters. We appreciate the support.
No, again, I think you have a committed group of commissioners that we want to work with the team to try and, create the right forward progress. So, thank you. All right. Again, commissioners, I think that the informational workshop on the strategic plan is important, and we should have everybody here. So we're going to move that. Lisa's going to agree to move that to the next meeting, and I appreciate the comments today. I think on both. Preservation goes hand in hand with what do we have, and then the voucher program. I mean, the sad part is that I think we've all become just accustomed to saying it is what it is. Right? The list is 12 to 15 years. It is what it is. We've reached a point where that's not acceptable. Right? What are we going to do about it? And how are we going to be more aggressive in trying to fix the perception, but more importantly, expand the program, because we have a greater need now, and it's not going to just go away because we go to sleep one night and hope that it does. So with that brings us to the conclusion of today's meeting. I want to thank you all for being here, for your patience, for your participation, and again, everybody for their support. Have a great afternoon.